I want to get started here and welcome you all to Alignment and our monthly visits by authors whose work is deeply meaningful to the people who gather here and create this beautiful online community of those who are seeking to embrace the wisdom and the practices of different traditions. I'm Margaret Somerville, and I'm one of the leaders of Alignment, and I am sitting on Lenape land. And I welcome all of you from literally around the world here. And I would welcome you to put in the chat. Some of you have put it in your names there, where you're from, but you're welcome to put that in the chat as well as you feel comfortable. But delighted to offer a most warm welcome to Reverend Dr. Randy Woodley tonight, who is a co-sustainer with his wife of Eloheh Indigenous Center for Earth Justice and the author of a number of beautiful books, including this gem, Becoming Rooted, 100 Days of Reconnecting with Sacred Earth. So it is, as I was telling Randy, it's not my practice to give a traditional bio as an intro here because I don't want to tell someone else's story for them. But I will say that we are all here because we deeply value your work and your writings, and we are so honored to be able to hear from you in person directly today. And to all of those of you who have gathered tonight, please engage in the chat as you feel comfortable, and there'll be plenty of times to interact with Randy by unmuting as well. So we hand the time and the screen over to you, Randy. Randy, thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you very much, Margaret. And I want to begin by apologizing for the last time I was supposed to be here. If you were here and I wasn't, please forgive me. It's completely my fault. I got the times mixed up because of the hours, so I did come on about the last 15 minutes, and Margaret said, everybody's already gone. So we're here now, and thank you for inviting me to be here to talk about what really tonight is. I'll yammer on a bit, and then I'd love to have most of our time just be dialogue, to create space for what we can do together, because what we do together is much more sacred than just one of us. And so I appreciate the ability to spend time here. As Margaret said, I and my wife, Edith, are co-sustainers. And we got rid of those titles that we used to have for a nonprofit, president, vice president, and just said, to the government, if we don't like those titles, we're changing those, because what we really do is co-sustain. And so the two of us, along with about 4 interns, and who are part-time during the year, and we grow food. Primarily, we're a seed farm. So we grow open pollinated with organic practices, vegetable, flowers, and herbs, and medicinals. We had been growing a lot more things, but we're beginning to cut down because we bit off more than we could chew. We can't continue to have 188 items on our seed list. We're just getting too old to keep up with that much planting. So we're working our way down. And what we are also is I guess you would call us a retreat center, maybe. I'm not sure. We're not officially that, but we have schools, what we call extended weekend schools, from Thursday through Sunday. And people come from all over the US and Canada. And we do a school with 2 other Indigenous elders. And basically our goal is decolonization and indigenization. We don't believe the Western worldview will take us very far into the future without failing us all. It's already failed us all, by the way. And so our goal is really to transform people's worldview from a Western worldview to a different worldview. And the one that we know and practice is an indigenous worldview. I'm a legal descendant of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma. And my wife is a tribal member of the Eastern Band of Shoshones in Wyoming. So we wanted to, the original vision that we had in 1999 was to how do we really had a concern for our own people, and we'd been working and serving among our own Native people for many years. We sort of did every kind of thing that we could, from helping houseless people to language classes to creating Native youth culture camps to sweat lodge ceremonies and powwows and after school tutoring, and just there's so many needs in our Native community. And our goal was to figure out how do we enable our own people without taking away their agency and their dignity, because the goal of both the Christian church and the United States government has been to create a dependency and take away our agency. And so we wanted to figure out a way to reverse that. I had a dream one night, and in that dream, I saw a place um, of school, a regenerative farm, a place where we could practice our ceremonies unmolested, and a community. And that dream actually, that was in 1990, actually 1998. And in 2004, that dream came true. And we had a 50-acre property that we purchased in Kentucky, which is former Cherokee tribal land, which is my people. And it was going great for a couple of years. We built up the farm and holding ceremonies and welcoming people, and elders lived there and young people lived there, and we practiced our ceremonies and had our schools. And we actually ended up, sad story, just to let you know, we were basically had to vacate that property. We were chased out by a group of white Christian nationalists who fired a 50 caliber machine gun on our property line day and night. And we eventually felt like someone was going to get killed. And so we had to give all of that up, end up moving to Oregon, where I got a job as a professor. I was the professor of distinguished professor of faith and culture was my title, and did that for 15 years at Portland Seminary. And then all the while tried to reimagine what that could be like out in Oregon. And we had a 3-acre farm for a while in a place called Newburgh, but the zoning restrictions were very tight, and eventually moved to where we are now, a 10-acre property in the same county, Yamhill County, in the city of Yamhill, about 2.5 miles out. And the dream has come true. We're having our schools. We are having our ceremonies. Um, our farm is going great. Our seed company goes great, Eloheh Seeds. And it's just everything's going pretty well right now. Um, and uh, and so we spend a lot of time doing that. We also do teaching our schools. We've had 5 schools already, and I think there are 5 more this year. Um, and then we will start also next year, or maybe late fall, some schools just for Native Americans. But along the way, we sort of figured out that non-Indigenous people also need to decolonize and to indigenize. And so we opened it up. And so we spend a lot of time helping all kinds of people. It doesn't matter who. Um, and then I do some writing. I've written, I think, 13 books. I have the books I'm most proud of is Becoming Rooted, and then my three children's books, which are called the Harmony Tree Trilogy. And those are um, very special to me. So, and then my wife and I have a book coming out in October called Journey to Eloheh, how Indigenous values can lead us to harmony and well-being. And so that's kind of who we are. I retired as a professor emeritus a couple of years ago, and right now we're in the Rocky Mountains in the United States right now. We were just in Billings, Montana, speaking to a number of Cheyenne Native Mennonite pastors. And then we're going down to Colorado Springs tomorrow, and we're doing an annual lectureship with at a UCC church. But we're open to go wherever. We've spoken at Jewish synagogues. We did a little thing for the regional Wiccans, I think. Wasn't it Andrea? Was that the regional gathering that I spoke at that time?
Well, I know you also spoke, you were kind enough when we started the eco-activism that I'm active in to speak on that.
Okay.
So that was very, 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 it was a great launch to our eco-activism that we do.
Yeah. My wife and I were part of something called the Common Table, which was a gathering of under the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon of people from all religions, and we loved being a part of that. We were surprised and honored to receive the 2021 Ecumenist of the Year award. It was first time ever given to a couple, and so Edith and I were really happy to do that. And the bottom line is that we will be around anyone where there's love, and that's what's important. So we don't really we practice our own indigenous beliefs and practices, and I know a lot of times people want to know about practices and things, but for us, our practices are not. We don't look at that as that's what makes us spiritual. We look at that as that's what reminds us that we are spiritual, but it's how we live our lives. Our being is what makes us spiritual. Our being human, our being vulnerable, our being creatures who take care of the earth and the whole community of creation, and who show love, not just theoretical love, but love. And love is actionable. And so, I think of, my own personal understanding of who the creator is that the creator is the most vulnerable being who exists. And I'm probably most spiritual when I'm vulnerable, and which means the opposite of that would be superficiality. The opposite of that would be uncaring, unconcerned, and those kinds of adjectives to describe what it means to not be involved in the whole community of creation. So that's where we're at. We come from a deeply Christian background, but I think about 15 years ago, we figured out we were not really Christians. We weren't that good at it anyway. And we I always tease people and say, well, I couldn't figure out what a vestibule was, and we didn't know what Lent was for at first, and but the truth is we just found that everything that was meaningful to us when we were Christians became more meaningful when we practice it in our own faith tradition of Native American spirituality. So that's where we're at. But like I said, we hang with anybody who will have us. So yeah, I want you to have questions and us to have dialogue. So
I love the way you say that it isn't our practices that make us spiritual, it's our practices that remind us that we're spiritual, and that vulnerability, I think, is something that is brought so beautifully to what people bring to alignment, people who gather here at alignment. We often find ourselves in the midst of different practices from different traditions, feeling incredibly vulnerable from places of grief and loss. And I think that sharing the story of our practices from our different ways we live, our different traditions, helps us to bridge those divides in our vulnerability. So just in telling your story, are there places where you find loss and wounding and harm woven into your story as an Indigenous person?
Yeah. So before we were able to get the 50 acres in Kentucky, we had been searching for 4 years to try and find a place that would meet those needs. And we were, there's a lot of duplicity in people who had promised us places and never came through. And when we finally got the place, and it was a horrible thing to have to lose it. And then that was in the bottom of the economic downturn back in the mid 2008, in 2006, 7, and 8. And we had to sell our property for half of the appraised value that and lost, so much. And I think our children were affected deeply as a result of that, especially our oldest son. And yeah, so that was, we basically lost all our support, had to start over again. We were very close to being houseless at one point as a family, and the Quakers gave us an opportunity to move in some really affordable housing, and all I had to do was kind of take care of maintenance with the lawns and things, and so they sort of saved us there. And yeah, I had to build our recover basically from the hurts, and then our son became houseless for 2 years, living on the streets of Portland, addicted to fentanyl, and he's been off of fentanyl and back home for 4 months now. So we're feeling really good about that. Uh, Another one of our other son, our youngest at 24, had a major stroke, and for about a month lost half of his body movement. Yeah, it's just, there's been a lot of family tragedy, and I can't blame it all on that, but I know that that's one of the streams that sort of, and so, the I guess the normal reaction is to blame those people and say, well, you know, they're terrible rednecks and everything else. But truth is that the real racism came in when we tried to deal with the state's attorney general, the sheriff, the Justice Department, Fair Housing Council, and no one would help a group of Indians out, basically described as an Indian commune, right? And that surprised us, but it shouldn't have, probably, given our history with the United States government. So yeah, we've suffered a lot of loss as a result. But we also have learned that we have to forgive those people. They don't realize the loss that they suffered as a result of making us move out. And in fact, some of them had some pretty terrible things happen to them. And to me, that's not retribution, but it's just, when you put that negativity out there, it often comes back to you. So, so they kind of did it to themselves. But so we're we we've made it so far. My wife and I have been together 35 years, and still best friends, and co-sustainers together. We love working together, and yeah, it's those times though, those hard times that really, and not to just be vulnerable, but to be vulnerable in front of other family members and others, and let them know, hey, we're human. And this touching our humanity with that deep grief and disappointments is the way that we realize our creatureliness, um, that it's not a perfect world, but life is about continuing on, and seeing the good in others and the good in ourselves, and sometimes the bad in ourselves. And we're in our native way, we believe, human beings are mostly good with the possibility of bad, but and we learn from our mistakes. And so um, yeah, we've had a lot of hurts, a lot of vulnerability, um, and there's that old saying, right? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Sometimes you feel like you're dead, I mean, and depressed and all of those things. But then right now, like with my son home from the streets, um, I just life is just good.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't enjoy the highs if I didn't have the lows, and I wouldn't want the lows again.
I feel there's a real beautiful way in your writing that you weave together the story of the hurt and the woundedness, the vulnerability, with the story of healing and hope. Not hope comes and supplants the woundedness, but it's woven into the story. And I find that to be really moving. And even the way Becoming Rooted is written, finding the healing and the hope in those 100 daily practices, or however often you do them, practices, with your prompt, and then your storytelling. I love how you weave the healing and the hope into the story.
Yeah. So when I wrote that book, I first of all, I only got 60, and then I was dry. And so I thought, I was going to ask the publisher, can I just write, 60 days of, and then I waited about a week or two just to be patient and wait. And then my wife said to me one day, "Hey, what about this? And what about that? And just reminded me of a lot of different things. And all of a sudden they just all came again. But the goal of writing the book was I try to write my books in a way that breaks through the theoretical. I mean, we don't really need just a bunch more knowledge. What we need is, to be working and living in relationship with the rest of the whole community of creation. And for me, I wanted to create something that people felt like, oh, I was there with them, kind of coaching them along rather than, telling them what to do. And so that was the goal. I hope it succeeded in that. And then the prompt or action point is to really break up that American Platonic dualism, which is disembodied theology and disembodied practice, to do something that actually means something. So, and almost all of them are allowed, now go outside and do this, right? So that people can reconnect with nature, because, nature creation, I call the community of creation, which we're a part of, is, it's really all we need, as a community of creation. Everything we need to know is out there, and everything we need to learn. And my understanding is that Creator put that there for a reason. And so everything else becomes a little bit suspect, but not creation.
We have I think the view here in alignment, although we are alignment interfaith contemplative practices, is that contemplative practice has to be married with action, as you say. And I know we have some real fans online here right now of action and contemplation. I'm thinking Larry sitting there. And also those of you who are from Iona, who are on right now in Iona Abbey on this island in Scotland, they're carved into the wall in the sanctuary, a monkey and a cat right by the communion table, to remind whoever is leading worship there that the monkey action and the cat contemplation live together. And so, yeah, I love to hear you talk a little bit more about how those two are married for you.
Yeah.
When
So I began this sort of journey more theoretical, I would say, because that was a typical Western way, and I had to decolonize my mind and realize that was a deceptive that was a deception that was well intended for our people, was to get us out of doing and being who we are and what we do normally as indigenous peoples who are, not perfect, not utopian, but our societies were much more loving and much more giving and than the Western societies that I know. And so and then I sort of when I married those two, if you will, when I went to Palmer Seminary, and I had a lot of great people, Samuel Escobar, Ron Sider, Tony Campolo, others who understood that Montford brought, who when it's not learn and do, it's both of those together, right? And they feed into each other. And so and then I became very active oriented and started justice grassroots organizing and other things. And I was very active and probably overbalanced. And those were my younger years. And now I think it's sort of age that helps me be more contemplative. When the Center for Action and Contemplation, Brian McLaren called and said, "Hey, I want you to be a part of our living school, be a faculty member," and I said, "Well, my history is much more activist than contemplation." But he said, no, that's not true. I've watched you, and so we need to, and so I don't know, I may have stumbled in and out of the marriage between those two to understand that, but I still lean much more about doing is being rather than thinking as being. I'm probably my nemesis is Plato's Platonic dualism that has taught the Western worldview that it's what we think that matters most. And to me, and people can believe how they like, and I might be wrong, but to me, that's splitting reality in two. We're whole beings on a whole earth, and that means that for us to work in our creatureliness, we need to use it all and to be a part of it all. And so our Keetoowah beliefs is that our job, our main role as human beings, is to be co-sustainers of the rest of creation. That's what we are best equipped at as human beings. And of course, because of capitalism and climate change and everything else, we have failed miserably at maintaining and doing our job. And so we get out and do our job just about every day. and try to model, if you will, um, how we take care of the earth and all the creatures, for example. And I think I wrote about this in Becoming Rooted, but wherever we've lived, we've always left room for the other parts of the community of creation. We have over half of our property is that we have the 10 acres now is just left for all of them. And we get rewarded all the time with visits by deer and hawks and, groundhogs and, eagles and, just elk sometimes and other things that, um, that if we didn't leave room for them, we couldn't learn from them. And so they're our teachers also.
And when we say the word wisdom, how often we've been trained to think of that that Greek philosophical wisdom, and the law and the wisdom. And sometimes I balk at saying that in this setting because our minds jump to the ways in which that theoretical wisdom has trained our traditions. But then in your book, you talk about the wisdom of go out and sit beside the stream and listen to the birds for 3 hours and take that wisdom from them as well. So are there ways you would like to comment on how we have been destroyed by that classical notion of wisdom in our different traditions, not just Christianity, but how we have in some ways supplanted our spirituality by our religious traditions?
Yeah. Well, this is all my opinion, and I may be wrong. And I respect everyone's belief. So, but my sort of nemesis, like I said, is Platonic dualism, because I think when Plato said that I think, therefore I am, and I am a mind, I just have a body, that he began a split in reality that and from that it was Pandora's box. It opened up all kinds of hierarchies, which his student Aristotle continued on and created. And some people call Aristotle the father of scientific racism, because he said, well, the Greek people are made of gold, and other peoples are made of silver and bronze, and they're all slaveable, but we're the ones who are supposed to be masters. And and from that, and then he taught, of course, Alexander the Great. Aristotle was Alexander the Great's instructor, tutor, and Alexander the Great spread, Greek dualism and Greek philosophy, Greek art, Greek, architecture, everything around the poetry, around the whole world of that time. Egypt, as far as Alexandria, Egypt, and other places, and then in the Renaissance period between the 14th and 17th century in Europe, they basically revived Greco-Roman philosophy, art, architecture, poetry, etc. And then that became what we know today as the classics. The classics, the highest form of civilization is Greco-Roman civilization. And if you don't believe that, just take a walk down Washington, D.C. and look how they influence the founders and the buildings that look like you're at the Parthenon. And then in that Renaissance movement, there were two other movements born that affected the world. One was the Enlightenment, which doubled down on the Greek dualism, and basically, with people like Rene Descartes, who said, he's the one who said, I think, therefore I am, and I am a mind, I simply have a body. And all the others, Adam Smith in economics, and Francis Bacon and the world of nature, and on and on and on. And so And then the other was the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, which basically also took more seriously thought than actions, and so much that they created doctrines that they were willing to kill each other over. And so wars were fought over beliefs. And and this is in Christianity. And I always, sometimes I just say, to shock people, Jesus didn't give a damn about doctrine. He cared about how we treat one another. And and the whole community of creation. So yeah, that's carried over. And even today, the classics are, if you're a high learner, you're going to study the classics, right? And you're going to be influenced by those. And so now it's important that we understand that all of those things have contributed to the hierarchies of men being over women, of white folks being over black folks and other folks, of human beings being over creation, and all of those false hierarchies that were created as a result of dualism and extrinsic categorization and living out of those categories as opposed to living out of the whole of reality. And in our indigenous people around the world, but I don't know every indigenous society, but I do know much of North America. And we didn't have that dualism. We operated living in our whole selves in a whole creation, whole of creation, whole community of creation. So yeah, like I said, I could be wrong, but this is how I put it together. I first started asking the question when I was young, like, well, what's wrong with white people? Why are they like that? And then I kind of got to ask a little sophisticated form of that. Well, what is whiteness? And it's not just white people who have whiteness. And in fact, some white people don't have whiteness. So what is that about? And then I really figured out, well, this is stemming, how'd it come to be? And it stems from the Western worldview. And this is how I trace the Western worldview back to understand it, is in the dualism that came. And so what we do is we're really trying to not just teach, but also demonstrate how to live in relationship with creation and other people. And so that's what we do. That's on our farm and in our community and in our ceremonies. And I think we've been somewhat successful. Hopefully we'll continue. And it's a big chore trying to get people to stop thinking of it. The truth is that a lot of people really aren't happy with the Western worldview that we've been handed, and they want to live in relationship with creation, their relatives, and understand them as their relatives, and how to treat one another. And so, especially not just young people, but especially the young people right now, and a lot of older people, realize that the Western worldview is a failed experiment, and we've been handed a bill of goods. And now we try to offer an alternative, but we're not trying to turn people into Native Americans. We're trying to get people in touch with their own indigeneity and understand the land here, and who, and hopefully build a relationship with the people of the land that they're on. And I'm on the land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho right here where I'm at in Denver. And to understand those people's understandings, practices, ceremonies, attend their events. They're still around, most of them. Get to know them, and they will teach us also how to live with the land, but also draw from our own indigenous roots, because we're all indigenous from somewhere. Doesn't matter where. We wouldn't have survived if we didn't know how to live with the land at one point. But since then, a lot of other philosophies, if you will, have come in, like the Western worldview, and captured people to take them away from that holistic living. And so that's kind of what we're about. In some ways, I guess I'm still like a evangelical, because maybe not for evangelicalism, but for converting people to a more indigenous worldview. I'm still an evangelist, I guess, because our future generations are not going to be very happy if they survive, if we don't disregard the Western worldview and find another way to live with each other and the planet. So.
I feel as if I have to come clean, Randy, and let you know that I have been a classicist for decades of my life.
Okay.
Trained as a classicist in Greek philosophy, and now, separate from that world, I am just finding much deeper meaning in my life as a contemplative.
Thank you for sharing that.
And with connection to the earth. So yeah, it was Plato all the way for me for decades, and just so grateful to be now reading and infused with indigenous theology and Celtic theology and connection to the earth, sacred earth.
Yeah, that's great.
So I don't want to co-opt all the questions here. For anyone else who would like to have something to say to Randy or to ask of Randy, please unmute or raise your hand or put it in the chat. Danny?
Hi, Randy. Thank you for meeting with us today. I just wanted to thank you because I come from a Pentecostal background in Australia, and a lot with what you've said, realizing the harmony of creation, the shalom of creation through experiences of pain. It was through the experience of pain that I was able to understand that I had a deep connection with my companion animal, and my Pentecostal theology couldn't articulate how valuable that connection was. So I just wanted to say that I'm finishing my PhD in animal theology, and when you say that you're evangelizing to a more Indigenous perspective, I just wanted to say that I'm evangelized now because I've been picking up your literature and reading it, and have really put that into practice and transforming Pentecostal theology from within, and starting those conversations and really transforming what that landscape looks like, to a point that I feel that I have onboarded, evangelized a lot of other Pentecostal scholars in this space. So I just wanted to say thank you, because you've made a huge impact, and especially in Australian Pentecostalism. So thank you so much.
Well, that's a surprise, but I'm so excited for what you're doing. I can't wait to see what you come up with. And I hope that we will be able to get a hold of whatever you end up with, and I'm sure you'll end up writing a book about this.
I am, and I've just released an article on animal glossolalia being a very Pentecostal expression of worship, and looking at that as a cosmic expression of worship. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Thank you. Yeah.
I've got one, Margaret, if you don't mind. I am listening to, I'm glad you're here, Randy. I've been looking forward to talking with you face to face. I've been listening to indigenous theology and the Western world, and I'm struggling. I was hoping maybe you had the key that would unlock that for me. There's a lot of great scholarship in there. There's a lot of great theology in there, and that's, I think, maybe where I'm having a hard time trying to weave the two together. So is there a perspective that I could take as I'm listening through that book? And by the way, now I'll go get your other one too.
Yeah. So that book was actually, it was a series of lectures I did called the Hayward Lectures up in Nova Scotia. And then they asked me I've just turned the lectures into a book. So it's very there's a lot of it's very narrative, right, in its form, and that's the best way to I know to do theology is to tell stories. And so yeah, I don't know what the key is, but I'm sure you have it somewhere in there.
Larry, I'm just curious, have you gone through the Becoming Rooted book? Because I think that the more practical stuff helps you much more than the theoretical stuff in my own experience. I can always talk my own experience. That you can, you can read theory all day long, but I think the going out and doing things is a much more powerful way of changing yourself.
That's probably a very good point, Andrea.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of good reviews, surprisingly, on indigenous theology in the Western worldview, because some people are like, well, it didn't seem like a theology book. It seemed like he was telling stories, and then all of a sudden it became a theology book, and I understood that it's just a different way of doing theology. And so I think if theology is only about what we think, then that's a whole different kind of theology that I do. But I think it has to be actionable. And the best way to find ourselves and where we find our place in that is to find ourselves in those stories. And so that's why I tell so many stories.
Yeah, I love the stories. That's talking
it,
about the turtle and so all those good stories. So I'll keep on going.
yeah, and the question answers at the end, the originally the editor didn't want me to include those, and I said no, these are really important because these are the questions that Western thinkers are asking, right? And so we spent, say, an hour on the lecture, and then we'd spend 2 hours on the question and answers, and I couldn't even put them all in there, but to me that's a very important part of the book is the dialogue between the people's questions and what they heard.
Thank you.
Thanks for reading it.
Anyone else? So I would say, Randy, I love the whole introduction of we are all indigenous to some place. And then you talk a bit about you coming from a background that is not just native to where you live, but all the different pieces of you and finding the way that you plant your roots in the land on which you live in order to find your harmony and balance with the earth. But can you comment on, how do we plant our roots and feel indigeneity when we feel displaced?
Yeah.
Don't feel as if we're in the home of our ancestors.
And that's a something that question applies to, so many people. I mean, most of us actually are displaced. Even 70% of the Native Americans in the United States live off reservation. And oftentimes the reservation was not even their original homes, right? So what we've had to learn, and we are, my wife and I, where we're at, we were in the land of the Kalapuyan, who are a different kind of people than we are, different kind of culture. And so we're settlers in their land as well. We have our own ceremonies and our own ways of relating to the land. Right before I left, we had a Keetoowah blessing of the seed ceremony. They didn't have anything like that because they weren't farmers. They were, river and woods people and ocean people. And so a whole different culture. So I went to the cultural authorities in the Kalapuyan tribe at Confederate Tribes of the Grand Round, and I said, hey, would you mind if we practice our own ceremonies on your land? We that's all we know is our own ceremonies, and they're seasonal, and they're different than yours. And we talked for a while about that, and yeah, so the response was absolutely, that will make the land happy, but don't do our ceremonies. And I said, of course not. We wouldn't do that. But so we practice our ceremonies on the land, and it's really, not as meaningful, not the same as when I do those in Cherokee country, those same ceremonies and when I did them there. But it's how, it's a compromise. And I think the land recognizes that. And I think the corn recognizes that, and the seeds. And so it all goes into prayer and ceremony, and dancing and singing, and I think that's better than to just ignore the land and act as if, well, I'm not in my home country, so I will just treat it as a stranger. I think we have to get familiar with the land that we're in, and not to take or steal or misappropriate the cultures who were their ceremonies, but to figure out, like, what are the things that we've been given, even just in our own heritage, whether it's Celtic or Nordic or whatever it is, that are meaningful and that will help us get familiar with that land that we're on. We can't be in Ireland, or we can't be in Norway, or we can't be wherever it is. I can't be in Cherokee country, but it doesn't mean that I can't do something. And I think the land recognizes that.
And if it's okay, I would like to throw out some thoughts that I know for myself, a big part of it is just go out and spend time and connect with the land in ways that are appropriate. Again, like Ray says, don't steal things from other people, because that's just not cool. But anybody can go out and look at a plant and just listen to it. And when I mean listen to it, I don't mean necessarily, and you can you can hear them moving in the wind if you're really, really quiet, but you can just spend time just looking at a plant and trying to open your mind to, what is it teaching me? When I know I go walking, it's really easy where I live because it's just gorgeous. And I'll go walking in the forest and I'll be thinking about how even things that are quote unquote dead aren't quite dead, because they are, they're in the process of recycling into something new. So that is a thought that is totally appropriate. And it's a way of getting connected with the only way to get connected with your land is, in my opinion, is to go out and be in your land. So just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's it. That's it's like the answer to so many of our questions are so simple. It's like, well, go out and be with the land, go out and be with the community of creation, and see what happens. I used to teach this class at the seminary, and in our native program that we created for a master's degree in intercultural studies. It was called Theology and Ethic of the Land. And we'd go out to the ocean, to the coast, and we'd go to the state forest, and we'd go to different places. But one of the things we would do is we would go spend time, and I would say, leave everything else there and just go out and be with the land for 1 hour. Don't say a word. Just be on the land and look around you and observe and pay attention and see what happens. And I remember the first time I did that, I was so afraid that they were going to come back and go, well, what was that about? Because I didn't get nothing, And no, everybody came back with more to share than we had time for. Because, and most people said, well, it took me like 20 or 30 minutes before I could settle down. And, but creation has so much to teach us. It's just waiting, and, and how special we feel when it takes the time, to show us something that we need to learn. So just to be out there on the land, with the land.
Could you have a word for someone who is feeling captured in a place where they don't feel as if they can get to the land? we had someone on here the other night who was in hospital. We thinking of someone who might be incarcerated.
Mhm. Yeah.
How, I mean, we can think of the beautiful places where we feel so deeply and easily connected to the land. But what about those times when we don't feel easily connected?
Yeah. And I look at things like incarceration as torture, because we're made to be a part of the land. And, but like hospitalization, you can bring plants in, you can, there's been lots of studies that show a window with nature outside heals people faster than just a blank wall. And so there it's hard, but you have to find ways. Even I get asked this question all the time about urban centers and cities, and the truth is that every city still has an ecosystem. We just don't recognize it because there's so much concrete. But if you look around, you'll see weeds growing, you'll see birds, squirrels, different things like this, and there's a whole ecosystem going on. Um, but we don't build our cities in the way that we should. We should build our cities with full of parks. I'm in Denver right now, and there's Denver is one of the places where I don't think they've built the whole city right, but one of the things they've done is they put parks everywhere, and so people get out. And I was at Botanical Gardens today, my wife and I walking around with our friends, and just amazed, totally in awe of the creation and our relatives there, whether they be cacti or pine trees or bonsai trees or and just soaking it all in and taking the oxygen in that they produce. And it was just such a great day because of that. So yeah, I think there are situations where people can't. Maybe they can get pictures, photographs, I don't know, to help, but yeah, it's a shame, and I think it's torture.
Another possibility, of course, like in the case of like a hospital, is sounds. If somebody, because sometimes there are cases where you can't bring implants because of, there are restrictions. I volunteer in a hospital, so I know this. But you can often bring in like sounds, and even the sounds of hearing birds and stuff is better. I mean, it's not optimal, but it's better than nothing.
Yes, thank you for that, Andrea.
And being out in creation helps us to be more creative. If there's anything that's outside the box, it's nature, right?
Could you give us a quick final just explanation of the word Eloheh?
Eloheh, yeah.
Okay.
Eloheh is our Cherokee word, that's it basically means that everything's in harmony and balance. The earth is producing what it should. Nobody's going hungry. People aren't at war. It's living the way that the original instructions of how we're supposed to live as human beings. And the wonderful thing about this Eloheh construct is that, all of our tribes, or most all of our tribes have them. Most indigenous peoples around the world have a construct, whether it's the Ubuntu among the Zulu, or the Maasai, or whether it's Shoshone with the Navajos, or whether it's the Nordic expressions, or whatever, is that there's a way that we all know how we're supposed to live, and often we have language that describe that. And for our Cherokee people, the word is Eloheh. But it basically, shalom, this big picture, shalom in scripture, the Christian scriptures. But yeah, it's just living in harmony and balance with everything else.
So in your parting words, would you say that our harmony and our peace that we are going to look for this week as we keep this precious time we've had with you in mind is that we are going to find our rootedness in the land where we are, displaced or not, where we are and where we can be. Find our rootedness.
Yeah, because Native American people, we didn't ever take out a copyright on nature, and so it's open to everybody. So all of creation is out there for us all. It's for everyone. No trademarks.
No. I am so deeply grateful for you giving us this precious time of yours and sharing your wisdom with us and the love of what you do and of this good earth with us and engaging us in conversation. And to all of you who are here tonight, so glad you could be here. Hope you can join us on Saturday, or perhaps it would be Sunday morning for you in Australia, for our continued conversation in our interfaith discussion groups. If you can join, let us know on our website. But to you, Reverend Dr. Randy Woodley, we are grateful for you. We will continue to read your work and to live the lives that you aspire us to. So
Thank you all so much for the invitation. I appreciate it. Okay.